I'm Dan Jones. Welcome to Interchange. Thanks for joining us. We have lots of things to discuss today. We'll talk about the presidential race, the Milwaukee debate, and how long Trump and Sanders remain on top. We will talk about the continuing controversy having to do with the state-run Lincoln Hills juvenile delinquent facility near Wausau and whether those troubled kids should be brought back to the Milwaukee area. And we'll wonder out loud whether or not Milwaukee should pour tens of millions of dollars into fixing the iconic Mitchell Park domes. All right, before we get going, let me introduce everybody. You all know longtime newspaper columnist Joel McNally and Kevin Fischer, who spent many years here as a broadcast journalist, many years after that as a legislative staffer over in Madison. And of course, you know Denise Callaway, former TV news reporter, now a communications and public relations professional. And again with us, Gerard, Randall, education and job creation consultant. Rick Horowitz will be along with commentary at the end of the show. All right, let's talk first about the presidential race. On the Republican side, Donald Trump remains on top, forcing more folks to drop out of the race after not doing too well during the week. In the Democratic PBS debate over at U.W.M, Hillary Clinton wasted no time ripping into Bernie Sanders after her huge loss in New Hampshire. It was certainly clear that both candidates are now trying to portray themselves as the one who should be most appealing to minority voters and the one who should be considered the closest to President Obama. Are Black and Hispanic voters going to change the direction of this race from this point forward, Denise?
Well, I think what we've seen really over the past two races is the power of Black and Hispanic voters when they have, particularly when there are candidates who appeal and speak to some of the issues that they find to be particularly important. So I think as we head into the South, it's going to be a tough slog for Bernie Sanders. He has had some people who have stepped out and said they support him. Ben Jealous, former head of the NAACP, among them. But you really have iconic leaders that people have looked to, and who understand, who are certainly strongly behind Hillary Clinton. I just don't know that there's that appeal amongst African Americans and Latinos in strong enough numbers to really help Bernie Sanders. But I'll tell you, he's been like a juggernaut. He really has been able to draw out and attract young people to vote in primaries. I think, though, this is the way I kind of see and sum up Bernie Sanders. He's somebody who's got a lot of great ideas, but he's very thin on how these great ideas become reality. And, you know, one thing that concerns me is this idea of Medicare for all, because it would actually, in some cases, give people less than what they're getting under Obamacare. So I think that these are things that are very appealing. In some ways, Bernie Sanders is like Donald Trump. He says these things that are very appealing to a group of the population, but the details behind how you make these work and the impact that it has is really thin.
Kevin, nobody's thought a few months ago that Bernie Sanders would be anywhere near the position he's in right now. No. So it's probably not prudent at this point in time to dismiss him and say, oh, he's going to fade away.
But I think his fortunes could change, and could change rather quickly because of some of the items that Denise just rattled off. Not a good week for Hillary Clinton, all right? When you lose by 23 points to a 75-year-old socialist wacko, that's not good.
I hate Henry Kissinger.
That's not good. And when the FBI comes out and says, yeah, we're on Hillary's tail, that's not good. And when we learned the day of the debate that subpoenas were issued against the Clinton Foundation, and that never came up in the debate, maybe because one of the moderators, PBS's Judy Woodruff, is a donor to the Clinton Foundation. Maybe that had something to do with it. So she did not have a very good week. I'm sorry, but Bernie Sanders, and he engaged in over excessive pandering. They both played the race card quite a bit because they do need Black votes, and Bernie Sanders just doesn't have that faction locked up. Hillary Clinton has tremendous support among Black voters, maybe 9 out of 10, maybe that high. And as you go into South Carolina now and parts of the South, those voters are going to be critical, and you may see Hillary now start to at least stop the bleeding a bit. She's going to need all the help she can get from minority voters, and historically they've been in her camp.
Do you think Sanders will be able to get the Black and Hispanic voters to move over to him?
I have no idea. I do think he's a healthy part of the race. He's pushing the Democratic Party towards towards the left, which is where it ought to be. Democrats have made a mistake trying to pretend they're Republicans and trying to act. And the uglier the Republican Party gets, here's what's happening. I mean, good God, the first two minor states that showed up voting were all white states, and now we're moving into states that actually look like America and that are diverse and that have different populations. And you have one party which is racist and is denouncing Muslims and wants to build walls and shut people out of this country on the basis of their religion, and another party which is progressive and believes in fact what we've always said this country believes in, equal rights and equal opportunities for everybody. So I think, to me, the Democratic Party is in great shape because, in fact, you've got one party who wants, one candidate in the Democratic Party wants to go as far as we can go, as quick as we can go, and Hillary Clinton is saying, no, I believe in everything Bernie Sanders believes, but I know that we have these Republicans who are, have been denouncing Barack Obama every year of his presidency and refuse to agree with him on anything, and we're not going to get there that quick. Boy, the Republicans are in trouble, though.
And the Democrats aren't?
No, they're not.
70-year-olds?
They're not, because the Democratic Party agrees on what they want to do, and they've got two good candidates. But let me tell you about what's happening to the Republicans, though. It's not the candidates that got forced out of the race that are a problem. It's all the ones that are still in the race. And that means the most ridiculous, absurd candidate, Donald Trump, who has a third of the vote, will continue to win primaries and win delegates because all those other candidates are going to split the vote. You've got all those other candidates that a lot of Republicans, intelligent Republicans, say we can't nominate an idiot like Donald Trump. We have to nominate a more intelligent candidate. We can't be openly racist. We would like to be subtly racist. And the trouble is, all those other candidates only get 10% of the vote. And you have Republican candidates that Republican leaders want to nominate, and they only have 10% of support among Republicans.
Because there's only Republicans still in the race.
You guys are in bad shape. Trump is probably going to be your nominee.
We are in bad shape, but you guys are in shambles too.
If in fact Hillary is able to attract the Black and Hispanic votes in the upcoming primaries, does Sanders counterbalance that by getting all the young people?
Well, he's going to get a significant number of young Black activists that will come into his camp. And so she still has a lot to be worried about. But one of the things that the Dems are organized at their convention, which the Republicans are not, which gives Hillary an advantage, is the superdelegates. Yep. And she's already lined up enough superdelegates to have the nomination. She had the endorsement today of the Congressional Black Caucus. So as she runs through the South, where there are a significant number of African-American and Latino voters, I don't think she should be worried if they come out and they vote for her. The question is, will they be enthusiastic enough for her to come out and do just that?
How are you going to keep Trump from getting the nomination?
So Trump's not going to get the nomination. You keep bringing that up, and I keep telling you it's not. Well, and you know what? Even if he did, he'd still beat Hillary Clinton.
Republicans deserve him for being ugly and racist.
In the case of the Republican nominee potentials, the reality is Trump has never gotten more than 35%. He's not going to get more than that.
Which is 3 times as much as any other Republican.
Yeah, but we've had 15 candidates. So as the number starts to winnow down, then you're going to see more and more coalescing around a candidate that is more in the Republican main. I really don't like the characterization of Republicans that you always make, that they're racist when they're not. And even those that are in the party that may not hold your view are still enough to go into a general election and win it over Hillary Clinton or Bernie Sanders.
All right, next topic. A lot more stories this week about the history of troubles at Lincoln Hills, the state-run correctional facility for juvenile delinquents near Wausau. It is under investigation by the feds after the allegations of abuse and neglect of the kids there. The state secretary of corrections resigned this week. Most of the inmates are young people from Milwaukee, and the county board here in Milwaukee says they want to bring them back here to the Milwaukee area. But then, a few days later, Milwaukee Mayor Tom Barrett says he's not sure there's enough room here to securely house an additional 170 inmates, and he worries about the effect it could have on safety in the city of Milwaukee. So do we bring them back, or do we leave them up there, or do we put them somewhere else?
Yes, we bring them back because it's a humane thing to do, and what's going on up there is criminal. Tom Barrett is running for re-election, and he's running against some demagogues who are demagoguing him on crime, on safety, and that's the only reason he said that. The fact of the matter is, what Lincoln Hills has exposed is the whole fraudulent mass incarceration model, which is take young blacks and older blacks, take them out of Milwaukee and send them to small, all-white towns around the state of Wisconsin for prisons to create jobs for white people guarding black people. And it is criminal. And in the case of young people, sending them to Lincoln Hills, it was like, let's get them out of sight and out of mind, and we won't even have to think about them. We don't care what's happening to them. And in fact, it turns out now that we know that Governor Scott Walker was informed in 2012 that criminal activity and sexual abuse and physical abuse, he was too.
All the news
he got
reports
the
today
letter.
say
He got the letter, and he said, "I never saw the letter because people don't show me letters to me."
His staff said
But what I'm saying is, the state government has been negligent, and they didn't care about the criminal activity going on in Lincoln Hills. Now the FBI may have federal charges against the prison system there, and we have to clean up the state prison system. But the state prison system is built on fraud. It is built on, let's take black people out of where they live. You know what? You know why? The legislature has more representation because we count the black people in prisons around the state of Wisconsin as population of those little towns where they're imprisoned, and
I guess
they aren't being represented by their politicians, but they have more representation up there than Milwaukee.
I would guess that there are a lot of, if they bring these 170 kids back to Milwaukee, the talk is, okay, maybe at the House of Correction in Franklin, maybe at the county grounds in Wauwatosa. I would guess there are a lot of people in Wauwatosa and Franklin who don't want them there.
I remember the fight just to get the Felmers-Chaney Release Center built on the north side of the city, and how much acrimony there was around that. So it's a case of where no one wants these kinds of facilities in their neighborhoods, in their backyards, and especially when you take a look at
except to create jobs up north.
Well, the kinds of young people that are there, 99% of them deserve to be in a facility pulled away from the rest of the community. So I would, on the one hand, want to say the mayor is probably correct in that we don't have enough space. If we were going to build the space, that space is going to have to be in someone's neighborhood where there's going to be a tough political fight to get it done there. I'm not saying that it ought not be done. I'm just acknowledging the realities of trying to get it done and bring those young people back, regardless of the neighborhood that it's going to be in.
Well. It's a very tough sell.
It's a tough sell, but that doesn't mean that we don't do it because it's tough. I mean, in many cases,
agreed last week that
in many cases, the right thing to do is also the tough thing to do. I don't disagree with Gerard that perhaps most of those kids deserve to be where they are, separated from society, but they don't deserve to happen to them what's happened to them.
I agree.
And as adults in this community, we have a responsibility to make sure whether our kids are at Lincoln Hills or they're at the county grounds, that they're being safely taken care of. And that did not happen. So we have an opportunity.
Them from Milwaukee, remove them from any support system of their families.
I heard some people, argue, well, maybe being around their families wasn't the best thing, but that's really not the issue. The issue was there wasn't an opportunity to figure that out because of where we decided to place these folks in order to create jobs in parts of rural Wisconsin where there are not many jobs. What we need to do is figure out a way to make sure that these young people are secure. I'm not talking about secure so they are separated from society, but so they're secure based on what has happened to them, and that they are in a place where they are safe. They're in a place where that we can evaluate what happened to them while they were in Lincoln Hills. So, to me, the discussion about, do we have enough secure space is only half the issue. The bigger part of the issue is how do we make sure that whatever damage was done to our children in that in that facility is repaired. That has to be as important as whether or not we can securely detain them. Because if we don't take care of what God knows what happened up there to some of these young people, what we have done is an incredible disservice to them, and quite frankly, an incredible disservice to the community that they will once again someday become part of.
But Kevin, there is also a concern that if there is not enough secure detention facility in the Milwaukee area, that maybe they'd start moving them into non-secure residential areas, and that will freak people out too.
That's the rub. That's why Tom Barrett said what he said, and I believe he meant it. He's correct to be concerned. 19 mayors and village presidents in Milwaukee County had their regular monthly meeting this week, and this was a top item of concern. They are worried about some of these juveniles coming into their communities, and they're not the kind that just, ring your doorbell and run. These are violent individuals. And the House of Corrections in Franklin is a medium security prison. That might not be appropriate enough. That might not be
Really?
The proper place to put them. It may not have. It may not have the space. It may not have the ability to handle some of them. So we all agreed last week that the Milwaukee County Board did the right thing.
Yes.
But that's only part of the solution. They said, oh, we got to get them back, and then they patted themselves on the back, but they didn't think about where they were going to put them, whether they would be secure, whether they would be taken care of, whether they'd have the proper people watching over them, how much it would cost, where the money was going to come from.
The money's going to come from the state.
The state will never go along with it. It's going to have to come from Milwaukee County taxpayers because the kids are going to be housed here.
The money is going to come from the state. Eventually, the state is going to have to do that. Oh, absolutely, it will. It's their job. It's their responsibility. And with the feds now investigating it, and this is part of what they have to do to rectify what happened to those young people, they will.
Legislators, whom we've all agreed are not really necessarily big fans and cheerleaders for the Milwaukee area, are going to vote to fund the relocation of these juveniles here?
This is not about Milwaukee. This is about
Milwaukee.
It is about doing what is right for those children, because those same legislators ought to be able to sit up and say, on our watch, bad things happen, and we need to be able to fix
Milwaukee
it.
County
And it
Board
was
should have had the foresight
watch
before they voted to figure out the answers to some of these lingering questions.
So we're going to wait until everything is perfect before we make a decision that we're not going to send any more kids there, and we're going to bring kids back.
And in fact,
that's ridiculous.
Solution.
Judges in Milwaukee County have already stopped sending children to that facility. They've known for a couple years how bad it was.
Racine hasn't sent kids up there
has
either.
already stopped sending children there.
And again, we're in agreement. Get them on a bus and get them back here. But then what do you do with them? Where do you put them?
I believe, Kevin, that we're going to sit up here in just a minute and talk about whether or not we spend $75 million to repair the domes. If we can have that kind of discussion about whether or not we repair a cultural icon in this community, we ought to be able to have that same kind of discussion about where we come up with the money to be able to safely house and treat our children in this community who are responsibility.
I think I raise issues that nobody else has thought about or is talking about. And again,
not in public forums.
That's correct. And I think those questions have to be answered to do this right, because you can't just say, "Oh, let's do it." It has to be done. It has to be done effectively if you care about the safety of these kids.
And of course, everybody cares about the safety of kids. You care about the safety of people in this community. I believe that there are a lot of smart people who are discussing this issue, and they can come up with a solution that provides safety for kids and also provides secure places for them to
All right,
house.
next topic. The iconic Mitchell Park domes remain closed because chunks of cement were falling from the roof and the glass onto the grounds below. Of course, safety of the public is the primary concern, especially after the fatal tragedy at O'Donnell Park a few years ago. Milwaukee County now has to decide if it spends hundreds of thousands of dollars on netting and temporary fixes and then tens of millions of dollars on permanent repairs. Or do we just say, okay, this is a crumbling, worn-out 50-year-old relic of the past. Let's close it down and move on.
Well, several things. The disappointment that I have in all of this is that we've got major races for county supervisor, county executive that are going on, and both the previous issue and this issue are items that should be at the forefront of the debates among those candidates, and we haven't heard a whole heck of a lot either at those public forums that they've held or at general county board meetings except on the superficial.
We don't hear about those races in the news media anyway.
And we don't get the kind of coverage that they deserve because these are really two significant issues. The other is that there are revenue sources that the domes can generate that the issue around juvenile detention would not be able to generate. Donors who are supporters of the parks, those that believe that there should be some fee increase attached to
the private sector.
The private sector. There are lots of other ways in which you can build support for either the repair or the replacement of those domes.
Kevin, you think it's a Happy Days era thing that we should be done
Well,
with?
no. You know, quality of life is important to a community, and those domes are not only important, but they're so visible, and they've been around for a long time. But you can't just put Band-Aids on it. I mean, you don't want people afraid to bring their families to the place for fear that something tragic could happen. The community has to decide. The county has to listen to the community, and if the community wants to save this, wants to salvage it at whatever cost, then it needs to go through with it. I am not going to say we'll just tear it down because of this, but I think it needs to be saved. But you can't just go to the taxpayers. There have to be multiple sources of revenue, and it doesn't have to come completely on the shoulders of the taxpayers.
So where do you get $75, $80 million? Do you cut the courthouse? Do you cut the sheriff's department? Cut the highways?
Well, let me tell you, you can't continue to cut everything in this community. Tax cut politics. Scott Walker, when he was county executive, refused to repair the parks, let them fall apart. There's not just the $75 million that needs to go into these domes. There's $200 million in infrastructure and park maintenance that is in arrears. We know that we need to spend $200 million to bring our parks up to standard. We know that from the tragedy that you mentioned of the parking structure on the lakefront that killed a child and injured other people, that we have crumbling infrastructure in this community. And as long as Scott Walker and now Chris Abele, now I'm not one of those who says, Chris Abele is just Scott Walker. He's much more progressive than Scott Walker, but they're both tax cut politicians.
Right.
And you can't keep doing that. If you keep doing that, everything falls down around our ears.
30 seconds.
Yeah, there's a cost to maintain these things that we treasure. And just like, out of thin air, things don't automatically replace themselves, repair themselves, or be updated. And it's fine to talk about, I'm not going to raise taxes. This is a zero. That's fine. That sounds good. But this is what the reality looks like when you do that. And so there is a cost. There's that saying that is very true. You pay for it now or you pay for it later. We did not pay for it when the cost to do the maintenance would have been much cheaper than what we're experiencing now. And we're going to have to make some hard decisions. And at the end of the day, we are going to have to pay for some things. Maybe it's not the domes, but you've got to make some decisions about some of the infrastructure around the parks. You have to make a decision about roads and bridges and other infrastructure.
And
it costs
the infrastructure
money
argument is national,
to do it.
too.
It costs money to do
Our
it.
roads and bridges all over this country are falling down.
All right, we move on. Okay, back to the Democrats' debate. Sometimes it's a single question that puts an event into a completely different light. That's what happened to Rick Horowitz, who was sitting there in the press section at U.W.M, separate room in a different building, but very nice flat screens, he reports. A single question and two answers, and he's not sure whether to be encouraged or depressed. Rick.
Bernie Sanders got the question first, and his answer was totally predictable. Hillary Clinton got the question next, and her answer was, I'm not sure. Yeah. Creative, inspiring, calculating? Here was the question. The world has seen many great leaders in the course of human history. Can you name two leaders, one American and one foreign, who would influence your foreign policy decisions? So Bernie Sanders went for Franklin Roosevelt and Winston Churchill, who rallied their nations during the toughest of times. Hillary Clinton was fine with FDR, she said, but for her foreign leader, Nelson Mandela. And I said to myself, nicely played. And I said to myself, way too cute. And I asked myself, if this debate had happened before the New Hampshire primary instead of before the Nevada caucuses and the South Carolina primary, would her answer still have been Nelson Mandela? Call me skeptical. Likewise, her loving embrace of President Obama. Who knew? And for that matter, Sanders' sudden extra attention to criminal justice reform, job training for young men of color, Might it be because a majority of Democratic primary voters in South Carolina are black? The good thing, at least in theory, about coast-to-coast contests is that they force the candidates to pay attention to a wide range of voters and a wide range of issues. The danger, of course, or at least it used to be, is that a candidate will say something in one state that he or she counts on nobody else hearing anywhere else. Now, the rise of social media and cable news have made that harder, supposedly. What a candidate argues in Oregon will be heard in a flash in Florida. Now, Republicans, at least this year, don't have to worry quite so much. They can simply say, Obama is Satan, and their crowds cheer everywhere. Now, for the Democrats, though, did somebody flip a switch after Iowa and New Hampshire? Hey, let's talk about the problems facing black people and Hispanics. Don't get me wrong, these are vital issues, totally worth discussing. I just wonder if voters in those first two states noticed that they heard a very different conversation, or whether voters in the more diverse states that follow wonder why issues like racial injustice are things only they should be hearing about. Call it responsive, call it pandering, call it peculiar.
Well, thanks, Rick, and thank you so very much for watching. Stay warm. Enjoy the rest of your weekend.